Hey everyone, just wanted to show you what's available in the members section for those of you who haven't joined or who are undecided about whether it's worthwhile or not. What we do is you still get access to all the same data, or as you do if you're a unregistered or even a registered user. You get to see the stock description and a little bit about the industry that it's in and the 12-month performance. And what we do when it talks about AI generated is for the more popular stocks or the ones that are, doing better or, better known, we go out to an AI tool and we ask it essentially, what does the company do and why might it be of interest to investors? And so, if you have a look, read through this, it's just to give you an idea of, what the company does and, if the industry that it's in, is a good one to be in, or what the particular strengths of the industry might be. And we give a bit more detail specifically about the industry down here. Again, we just sort of say to the AI tool, tell us about the consumer electronics category and why might it be of interest to investors? What are its strengths? Underneath that, we give you what the 12-month performance breakdown is, and that's just a very, very high level, purely talking about the price, where we sort of say, well, if you'd invested 12 months, the last 12 months or 12 months ago, you'd be up around 15% roughly, or 14.5%. And just in, understandable terms, $1,000 in it, you'd now have $145 back, on top of your $1,000. So, very simple metrics. We also talk about, if you managed to pick the lowest price, you'd be up 40%. So, if you look up here, if you'd managed to buy around here, you'd be up roughly 40%. And you can do things like you can change the, chart values depending on, what timelines you're interested in. And this bit updates, you can see, 6-month performance talks about, an 8% return versus a 10% return if you've managed to pick that low. And so that just sort of changed some of the data on the page. If you scroll down, the bit that you get as a member is you get to see the latest company news. So not only do we want to know, how's the stock performing and whether the industry that it's in is a good industry, we want to know what the sentiment is around it. What's the news coming out around it? Is it good news or bad news? And so again, we get a feed of all the latest news headlines. We just display the last 10 because, that's, I guess, the sort of closest snapshot you need. And then we run a tool across it that talks about whether that, news is considered positive or sentiment, just based purely on the language that's in the article. So if it's a positive sounding article, it'll be positive. And if it's if it's bad news, like bad earnings or something like that, then it'll show it's negative. We want to know who the company officers are, just to get a little bit of idea about what their experience might be. If you click on one of these links, it'll take you off to a Google search, just so you can find out more about them and what they're being mentioned in the news for, or what's happening in their careers or backgrounds. Gives you a bit of an idea of how old they might be. Just some people like to know how old the heads of some of these bigger companies are, just to if that's a gauge of experience or not, who knows. But it might be better if it's run by a bunch of people in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, and perhaps 20-year-olds, depending on whether it's a more mature company or whether it's a brand new startout.com situation. So we also want to know what the big boys think. So these are the institutional holders, and these are all people with skin in the game, so to speak. Like, these are the really big companies who might hold tens of millions, hundreds of millions, billions of dollars potentially invested in some of these companies. And we like to know if they're buying or selling. So again, you can just sort of see through here. Some of the names you'll recognise, like Vanguard or BlackRock or Berkshire. If they hold a company, it tends to be fairly good news. If they start to sell it, it might be bad news. But something like selling off 0.5% of their position, it's not half. It's literally 0.5%, half of 1%. So they can sell for all sorts of reasons, just rebalancing portfolios and whatever else. But if you start to see some big consistent sells coming through, then it might give you a bit of hesitation, perhaps around putting your money into that stock. Same with funds. So again, funds are also people with skin in the game. They also hold large portions of stocks. Again, they're more prone to perhaps rebalancing type actions than some of the the bigger institutional holders. But it's always good to see well-known funds holding a particular stock, and especially if they're all accumulating, it's always a a good indication that things might be good with that particular stock. You just got to imagine, these guys all have thousands of analysts and hundreds of years of experience across all their users. When they're looking at whether they buy into or out of a stock. So it's they've got better tools than you and I. Insider transactions. So again, insiders can sell for a whole range of reasons. It's a bit more sort of alarming when you're seeing a lot of them all selling. So if there's insiders in a company they're selling, and you don't know why they're selling, that can sometimes be a bit alarming. But if you click on the link here, you'll be able to open up the SEC filing, and that will actually tell you the reason behind their sale. So it's, every time one of these people buys or sells, they have to register it. Then has a link that tells you, why they were selling. What was a particular reason. The next thing is financial news sentiment. So, this one here, we just basically look at whether articles out there are generally positive or negative. So, um, this is, from a whole bunch of news sources and news feeds and, some of your more prominent, websites. And so you can see that, generally, the news around Apple in particular has been fairly positive. You can have a look at financial tweet sentiment as well, or X that it's now called. And again, this is, if this one here is, large news type organizations, this one here is very much your Twitter, I guess, end consumers and their opinion on, what the stock may or may not be doing. And with both of these, these aren't necessarily people who hold the stock. It's just, people who are writing about the stock. Same with this one here. It's just people who are speculating about, whether it's good times or bad times ahead of it. And, they might not necessarily be stockholders. If you want to analyze data yourself, you've got the ability to download, all the fundamental data and all the price data. That's the entire history of the stock from day one. Whatever data we've got access to, you get to download it as well. Market cap over time is interesting. Just sort of shows you, how a company's progressed over time. You can see, as interest, increases in that particular stock or decreases, it's basically the share price times the number of outstanding shares. So, as the share price goes up, you'll tend to see, the market cap will follow up, in a very similar fashion. And again, we go back as far as we can go back to some extent. So revenue, and this is where it's going to get really interesting. So what we're trying to do is we want to make it just as simple as we're making our site with, being able to see how the price is performing over time, very simply. We're going to do the same thing with financials. So again, we're going to go back as far as we can sort of go back, and you'll see that things like the revenue and the quarterly performance, just a very simple being able to glance at them and saying, well, that's heading in the right direction, that's heading in the right direction. So that seems like a good thing. You drop down to something like net income, effectively their profit to some extent. And so again, you can see it's heading in the right direction. They've certainly had a big spike here, over the last 2 years. But quarterly, which is a more sort of micro movement, you can see they're not doing too badly as well. A little bit of a drop off, in the last quarter, but overall it's going up. And so these are the first two of these charts that we've got up and running. But you can see here we also provide you with all the detailed financials, and so all these bits of information here we're going to build these really simple charts out of. And so this is the bit that we're working at the moment. And so it's just you've got a balance sheet with all the common stock, capital stock, retained earnings, cash equivalents, whatever's important to you that you might want to look at. We've probably got the data for it. And as I said, we're just going to try and display all of this in a really simple, nice, easy visual way. We can sort of glance at it. It tells you a little bit of a description about what it is, and you'll be able to see, at a glance, how that stock's performing. So, if you're skimming through these, it's hard to sort of compare. But once they're into this chart type format here, which is what we're working on, as soon as you see one where it might be all red, for example, heading down the wrong way, you could have a look at what that particular chart is and, very quickly understand, well, that's something that's important to you or it's not important to you. But, you'll get some of the, information in here, will be quite interesting just to, see how different stocks are performing on different metrics. That's all the balance sheet stuff. So you can see there's going to be a ton of data there. If you look at my little cursor up here. And so all this is available in this text format. It's all available in a downloadable format. and we're going to turn all this into a chart that you'll be able to skim through. So just massive amount of data for each stock, particularly the more prominent ones. Income statement, so operating expenses, sales and marketing expenses, whatever data that they're filing. If we can display it, present it, we will. So that's back to 1986. So some of the data there is quite light on, but income statement, heaps and heaps and heaps and heaps and heaps of info. And so give us another couple of months, and we'll have all this in charts. Or maybe not a couple of months, might even be a couple of weeks, just depending on how quickly we can get through it. But it does take a little while once we've compiled it to make it a bit more visually attractive. Outstanding share data. We've got heaps and heaps and heaps of info. So hopefully that was a little bit useful, but it tells you, all the data that we've got available here, and, there's more to come. Just EPS trends, estimates. Got a lot of data across a lot of stocks. So it's good. Anyway, hope that was interesting, just to give you a little bit of a glimpse into the members area and what extra information you get for your membership. This charting area is the thing that I'm looking forward to. I think this will be quite interesting to be able to flick through and just get some bit more insight into some of these stocks that normally we might not look at. Anyway, thank you for listening.